Welcome to Weather Extra on CBS News Bay Area. I'm KPIX5 meteorologist Paul Hagan. We use these segments to take a deeper dive into a different weather topic. This week, we're going to be talking about El Niño. It's something that requires a little bit more explanation than the time we can usually devote to these specific subjects during our weathercasts on KPIX5. So let's talk about El Niño because it looks increasingly likely that El Niño is going to have a huge impact, not just on our weather in the Bay Area, but across California and around the entire world later this year and into 2024. But first, since it's been 8 years since the last El Niño event, let's do a little refresher on the science of this, exactly what it is. It's something that does have an impact on weather across the entire country, but it's something that actually occurs thousands of miles away in the equatorial Pacific. It has to do with sea surface temperatures. So let's set up what usually happens. The normal state of affairs is that the trade winds, which blow from east to west, take the warm ocean water near the equator and push it into the western Pacific. What that allows is for cooler water to flow from underneath and replace it off the coast of South America. It's called upwelling. So usually the temperatures off the coast of South America are quite cold and the temperatures in the western Pacific are very warm. Now, during an El Niño event, the trade winds either weaken or even reverse. And so it's like tilting a bathtub where all of that warm water that's usually packed up near Australia and Indonesia floods across to the other side of the Pacific Ocean. It pushes that cold water farther down in the eastern Pacific, and we get this abnormally warm patch of water off the coast of South America. The problem is that while that is a sea surface temperature phenomenon, it has a big impact on the weather patterns in the atmosphere above ocean level, and it actually has a downstream effect, not just locally, but around the entire world. Now, we're already starting to see the signs that this is beginning to develop. We're going to bring in our virtual Earth here and take a look at the sea surface temperature anomaly map. So we're tracking how far above or below average current ocean temperatures are, and you can see that bright blob that is just off the coast of South America already. Even though we're not into the peak of the time of year when El Niño usually occurs, which is usually during the wintertime months, we're already seeing that patch of warm water showing up, and you can see the trail that leads back into the western side of the Pacific. All that water is flooding across in the opposite direction that it usually does. So we're not into officially El Niño status yet. That takes a little bit of time to evaluate, and according to the latest data from NOAA, they estimate about a 40% chance that we are actually going to be in El Niño conditions once they tabulate the data from April, May, and June. We take this in 3-month increments, so you see the AMJ standing for April, May, and June. You're going to see more of those abbreviations as we take a look at the probabilities as we go farther into 2023, because those probabilities are going to increase dramatically. By the time we get towards late summer or early fall, we're looking at an over 90% probability that we are going to be in an El Niño event, and over a 50% chance that it's going to be a strong El Niño event. That's something that we've seen recently. The last El Niño that occurred in the winter of 2015-2016 also was categorized as a strong El Niño event, and that means that the impacts that it has are going to be that much more dramatic across the entire world. Let's talk about the impacts of El Niño on a typical basis for the entire country. And the way that this happens is because the weather patterns get thrown off, the jet streams get rearranged from their typical arrangements. The Pacific jet stream gets nudged farther to the north, which brings unusually wet conditions to Southern California, the desert Southwest, and the Gulf Coast. And the polar jet stream gets pushed way up to the north, which results in unusually warm conditions for the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada. This is actually very similar to the Mother's Day weekend weather pattern, with wet conditions in the desert Southwest, an early kick into the monsoonal pattern, and unusually warm, even record-setting temperatures in the Pacific Northwest up into British Columbia and Alberta. Again, we're not officially in El Niño conditions just yet. For the Bay Area, we are on the very edge of that wet signal. Things can technically go either way. People tend to associate El Niño winters with unusually wet conditions across all of California, but the farther north you go, the farther away you get from that strong correlation to wet conditions. So we look back at the chart tracking El Niño events, which show up in these red spikes. These are the sea surface temperatures dating all the way back to 1950. And there are 5 different strong El Niño events that we can identify and kind of look back at the data for the Bay Area and see how our rainfall has shaped up during these events from the winter of 1965-66, 72-73, 82-83, 97, 98, and the last one, which was 2015 and 2016. Looking at those numbers and adding up the rainfall for downtown San Francisco, because it has the longest climate record, three of those events, 1997, 98, 82, 83, and 72, 73, were unusually wet winters overall. Rainfall, especially in 1997 and 98, was double what is typical during the wintertime months for downtown San Francisco. That's 3 of those 5. The other 2 did not show that strong correlation towards wetter than normal conditions. The last El Niño, what they referred to as the Godzilla El Niño, had almost exactly average total rainfall for the water year in 2015, 2016. And that one that occurred back in the mid-1960s actually had below average rainfall. So things can go either way. And as we look at the long range outlook from the Climate Prediction Center for December, January, and February, lasting into early next year, they're showing a decent chance of drier than normal conditions for the Bay Area. Now, there's going to be a new outlook that comes up for this time frame later on this month, as El Niño looks like it's going to become more and more likely. Curious to see if this projected pattern gets rearranged a little bit. But while there's going to be a lot of talk about the strength of the El Niño and the impact it's going to have across the entire country and around the world, in the Bay Area, it doesn't mean we're locked into a wetter than normal upcoming water year, like the one that we just had, but it's something that we're going to have to monitor. There are other what we call teleconnections within the atmosphere that can also have a heavy foot on the scale, heavy foot on the gas pedal, driving us in either a drier or wetter than normal direction. The other thing that we have to talk about before I wrap things up is the impact on global temperatures. The last time we had an El Niño event, which was in 2015 and 2016, it was categorized as the warmest year on record globally. This is a chart that tracks global temperatures dating back to 1975. This is from the Weather, Climate, and Human Systems Lab, and you can see the overall trend towards global temperatures being much warmer over the past several decades. These lines at the end here are their forecast for the next 3 years. For this year in blue, for next year, 2024 in red, and for 2025 after that. They're estimating about a 50-50 chance that because of the influence of El Niño, 2023 is going to be categorized as the warmest year on record, but it's a record that probably wouldn't stand very long. They say that there's a 75+% chance, technically a 76% chance, that 2024 is going to become the warmest year on record, and there's an 8% chance that 2024 exceeds the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold agreed to in the Paris Climate Accords. That is kind of the red line that we look at in terms of the impacts of climate change, a line that we can't get past for a long period of time, but we already might be approaching that because of the influence of this developing El Niño. It's something we're going to keep our eyes on as we head through the next several months, because this is something that is going to slowly evolve as we head through the rest of the spring, into the summer, and especially into the fall. We'll cover another topic in Weather Extra next week. If you have a question for us, you can email it to us at weatherextra@kpix.cbs.com.